Oh, that's a good workout. Always a good way to start out the Wednesday. Hey, gang, welcome to another episode of Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee, brought to you by the team here at Domino, empowering L&D teams to create, manage, and deliver impactful learning at scale. Paul, how's your day going so far?
I was feeling a little creaky until about 5 minutes ago,
Hey,
and I'm feeling good now. I
awesome.
got it all kinks worked out and, now ready to get the brain kinks worked out.
Sometimes getting warmed up in the morning is a bit of a skill, he said, but bump bump.
Or is
Folks,
it a competency?
perhaps we're going to sort that out today. Gang, we have Corrine Pagano here with us. Corrine, I know that you're at lots of conferences and lots of sessions, but there may actually be folks in our community here who have not encountered you yet. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in today.
Thanks for having me. And I suspect you all have heard that music before because I noticed the drums going. So, Corrine Pagano, I am a co founder at Rising Tide Cooperative, which is a consulting and coaching group that we have formed to help organizations sort through skills transformation and AI transformation. So, we work a lot with leaders on how to do that. But I have been in the L&D space most of my career and have led product teams at places like lynda.com and LinkedIn and D2L and Degreed and Wiley. And then most recently, I wrote a book called Building the Skills-Based Organization. I have to do the
Please do.
prop
Woo!
do the prop. That is really my way of aggregating the last almost decade of work that I've done with organizations on skills and hoping to help more organizations become skills-based.
Hmm. So let's start out. And we're kind of joking earlier, skills and competencies and things like that. I mean, how do you define skills from your perspective? Where are you coming from on that?
I love this question because I've worked with so many organizations and every organization kind of has a slightly different spin on it. I try to keep it very simple. A skill is something you can do that can be measured. That last part is actually really important because it differentiates things like mindsets or behaviors from something that actually can be done and measured, which is usually tied in a work context to a task. So that balance of what task can I do is the context for skills.
Very cool. And should we contrast that potentially with competencies? How is it different from
Yeah.
competencies then?
So I actually spent a whole section in the book talking about this because competencies are usually a group of skills in context of completing a thing, a milestone, a goal, an objective. And so they are related to skills. And in fact, some organizations clump what I would call competencies in with skills just from a measurement perspective. A really good example is leadership, which, as we could probably all agree, is not just one skill, it's multiple skills. But a lot of organizations, in how they think about data, will say leadership is a skill. And the reason why they do that, and I don't think that's necessarily a problem as long as you know the difference, is that a lot of times when L&D folks talk to folks outside of L&D, they don't want all the details of the underneath the umbrella skills. They want the category. So if you think about a competency as a category under which a bunch of skills usually fall, that's how I think about it. AI skills, which gets thrown around a lot recently. If you work with AI closely, you know that's not one thing. That's
Yeah.
it could be a wide range of things, right? But as a category, it's useful for leaders and organizations to talk about AI skills or AI as a skill because they know they need to invest there. They know that something is critical for their business. I see that quite a lot. I could go into the whole background on higher education, built their models around competencies. It was actually how I got into working with skill data is I was working at an organization that had both higher ed and corporate customers. And they asked me to figure out why companies were feeling like higher ed recently graduated students weren't prepared for the workforce and what was the disconnect between higher ed and employers. And so that led me to go down a year-long rabbit hole of conversations and sorting out why higher ed had focused on competency-based education and employers were talking about skills.
Hmm. So what do you mean I'm not spending the rest of my life writing formal essays using the APA? Anyway.
I applaud higher ed for trying to understand their customers, both students and employers, in terms of creating a pipeline of the new workforce, but they just didn't quite get the context right of what employers really wanted to know. And so that caused this challenge of higher ed saying, well, we've built competency based education. And employers say, yeah, but what are the skills that you're preparing people for? And so that conversation really has been ongoing and still is ongoing as we think about how do we prepare people for work. So
And hey, we're only minutes in, and Carmen was already saying in the chat, excited to be here. I'm leading a skills-based organization program at Sage. Kareen's book is fantastic. So look, the reviews are already coming in
thanks, Carmen. Hi.
for something that's only been out in the wild since I think you said October 14th. That's
Just a couple
awesome. Yeah.
When I think of competencies, I've ever been around for long enough, helped develop the competency engine. One of the challenges in applying that in the past, and I'm wondering if maybe this is because I've seen, and you probably have seen a lot of shift in organizations from competencies to skills.
Yep.
One of the challenges with competencies always was defining that. Leadership is a great example. You can have leadership competency, but what does that really mean? Everything is not equal in there. And how do you define leadership? And that process previously it was really for each competency developing several points, and there's several different ways to measure leadership and knocking those out. It seems like in some ways, as you said, skills has operationalized that, and maybe a competency has become a group or a category or family of skills in there. But what's the shift has happened with organizations? Is that why? Is just they realized they weren't measuring anything or getting consistent results, or it was easier to talk about?
Yeah, I think skills initiatives and to become a skills-based organization, it's really a data transformation more than it is well, it's a whole organization transformation, but it's grounded in data. And so I think as technology has gotten better, as our systems have gotten better at analyzing and collecting data and looking more deeply at data, we've been able to kind of get a little bit closer to what is it that we care about measuring? How does that relate to someone's performance in their job? How do we start to because I do think it was a noble effort that we kind of 10 years ago, there was a big push for organizations to define the competencies in their
Mhm.
organization. There were a couple challenges with that. One, we didn't have systems to keep that information updated. So often by the time they finished their competency models for the organization, it was already outdated. And they would throw up their hands and say, well, now what do we do? Like, we can't keep pace with the amount of change in our organization. So imagine that 10 years ago and now, today, the pace of change is
Mhm.
exponentially faster with technology just throwing us all for a loop in terms of staying on top of these things. But now we have data mechanisms, including AI, that can help us constantly adjust and look at data in different ways and collect new kinds of data and let us know, hey, did you know that this might be an emerging skill in your organization? Like the mechanisms we have for collecting data are much more sophisticated now. So I think that maybe some organizations prematurely threw out the competency models that they had built out, or if they were like, oh, we're not sure if we can stick to these. But for the ones that continued to support competencies in their organizations, I think they're finding some of the shift to skills a little bit easier because they've already gotten a head start in how they think about the capabilities of their workforce and the work being done in their organization.
Yeah, it seems just like we do many things in life, breaking it down into those smaller pieces because some of those pieces are changing. I think But some people maybe don't realize if they haven't been involved in that. Competency is not only at defining the competency, but defining what makes up it there and
Yep.
validating that those are the right pieces to make it up for it. And then if some skills get introduced, that changes the whole model and what leadership means as opposed
Yeah.
to what it meant before, where if you're looking at those individual pieces, it's easier to swap them in and out. And yeah, they may be under leadership, but hey, that's a skill we're no longer interested in. And
Yeah.
leadership is just a general description there. Have you found that? I'm thinking about folks out there that are either in or moving into a skills based organization. You can
Yeah.
paint a picture of what are some of the things that a skills based organization who's really doing it well already have or have in place? What kind of things have they implemented, technology, process wise, any of those things? What was that
Yeah.
picture look like as success?
I'm so glad you asked that question because when I started writing the book, I asked myself that question. Like, are there any organizations out there that are already doing this that I could use as a North Star to like inspiration for organizations that are just starting? There's a bit of a spoiler alert here, which is most organizations are just starting. There's very few organizations that have actually created more sophisticated skills models. The example that I use in my book is EPAM, and Sandra Laughlin, who works at EPAM, was gracious enough to contribute to the book. And I would say those organizations have ongoing assessment models in data collection. So they're kind of constantly evaluating human performance and categorized in skills to say, how can we understand what our people's capabilities are and how do we measure that? There are organizations that use that data for a wide range of decision making. So everything from what skills are missing in our organization and where should L&D invest to how do we know what types of skills we need to hire for to promotions and internal mobility. How do we keep people engaged and let them find opportunities internally to strategic workforce planning and broader strokes? How are we thinking about the work our organization needs to do for the future? And then, therefore, what skills our people need? So it's really this combination of a really solid data strategy and ongoing assessment and data collection paired with skills informed decision making. I tend to try to emphasize that all the decisions where skills can help are already being made today with some amount of data that organizations have, but skills can add more specificity, more detail to those decisions and give you a different lens in thinking about them.
Yeah, we had a just a couple weeks ago a great discussion on measurement and measurement standards that have been put in IEEE. I'm thinking about now. Okay, that felt like a lot, Kareen. I'm not kidding. That's probably why you had trouble finding somebody who's doing it great all around there.
It
But
is, it
it's a
is, and
journey, I'm sure. And so, what are some of the places that folks can look at that either they may not realize they're already doing and double down on
yeah,
that, and or some of the different either as measurement, some of the ways to start seems like that'd be a good start. What are some of the starting points
yeah.
of some of the things they can look to start to implement when the organization wants change, but as we all know, want and actually ready to do are different things.
And this is definitely one of those transformations where that's a big difference. Like, understanding the value and wanting to get to that future, we're seeing more and more organizations say, "Oh, yes, we need to be skills based. We need to understand the skills our people have." The actual journey to get from where most organizations are to get there is not an easy one. This is not a project. This is a commitment to thinking about people's skills in a different way than they potentially have before, and for using that data in decisions where they've never had that data before. And so I always recommend that if somebody comes to me and I'm an L&D person and says, "We're transforming to become a skills-based organization," my first question would be why? Because the real driver for becoming skills-based needs to be a business decision because this is not an easy problem to solve, becoming skills-based. You really need to have a driving rationale and a business case for why. If they can answer that question of why they're becoming skills-based, then that helps me as an L&D person start to think about how do I support the solution for that why. So if the answer is we're transforming our workforce to incorporate more AI workflows. Now I've got an inclination. Well, I need to understand what skills our folks need regarding AI. So that's one clue. I need to understand how work is changing because now AI is being introduced. So that's another area that I can start to focus on and start to dissect. And then the other question I would ask is what are the metrics that we want to measure? And it's good you had a data session earlier because identifying what your goals are from a metrics perspective helps me as an L&D person know where I need to focus to help impact those metrics. The other side of getting started is, and I will scream this from the rooftops until I don't have to anymore. L&D and HR folks historically have been a step removed from the work that's happening in organizations. And becoming more skills based forces you to collaborate and work very closely with the people who are closest to the work. So if you're going to help people develop skills, you need to understand the work that they're doing. You need to understand what skills they need. You need to understand what proficiency level they need. L&D can't be off on the side figuring that stuff on their own. They kind of need to be in the trenches collaborating with business partners. So it's a real opportunity for us to get closer to the work being done. And I think that's only a good thing for L&D moving
Yeah.
forward.
We've talked on many times in the many years we've been doing Idiotic, but the idea that L&D tends to be siloed off, isn't part of some of the core decision making. It's often seen just as a service provider. Here's a PowerPoint deck. Here's the manual, and let's turn this into training, and et cetera, and delivering something to someone's expectations, and not even always being able to be part of the decisions and the getting started of the ground floor of getting things. So we could sit back and think, what kind of skills? But there's people who have those skills or who are doing the work, and being connected.
Yeah.
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 And thinking too with the measurement. So one of the challenges along with that, when maybe L and D HR says, "Hey, we are going to measure things," or maybe they start to adopt XAPI and start to measure things, then of course that's measurement of one piece, but the other piece that I often hear is, "Hey, that measurement needs to be tied to something that's being measured in the business that has the impact in there," and that seems to be a crucial missing piece. I'm wondering if you could share some examples of things that, and when you're working with folks, they were the L&D team with discovered, wow, here's types of things that are getting measured all the time. We just don't realize it. And here's some other areas where they want results, but they aren't measuring the other end of that to go that you're going to have to probably help encourage them. I'm guessing there's probably some patterns, maybe.
There definitely are. I used to do a like pre-conference sessions or full day workshop on measuring and marketing learning impact because I think this is really an area where a lot of folks that are focused on design and building content and courses and thinking about that side of L&D don't necessarily pull the needle through or haven't historically to business impact of like, okay, what are the metrics that I'm really trying to influence? My starting point is always, are you helping the company make more money or are you saving the company money? And that is a very simple question to ask yourself of like thing that I'm doing influencing one of those levers. Because at the end of the day, and I'll talk about some of the more nuanced metrics, but at the end of the day, it always comes down to that. It always comes down to can we help? Will this help us get more customers, drive more revenue, help the business grow? Or will this help save us money in some way that makes shareholders and executive folks happy? If you can answer that question, like top line, then you can get into the more nuanced, well, how do I know that this is helping us save money or make money? And so for skills, there's usually line of business metrics, which are how is this function operating more effectively? For sales, it becomes usually pretty easy because are salespeople selling more? Are they closing deals faster? So, whatever those metrics are that your organization looks at for revenue drivers will be the ones you'll want to think of. For other areas of the business, it's a little bit more nuanced. So, customer support roles and functions are usually around customer satisfaction. It could be the efficiency of resolving customer questions or requests. It could be retention of your customer service employees. And actually, retention is a key employee metric driver that often is something that we could take a look at to say, how are we influencing retention numbers across the organization? But engineering, you're looking at how quickly are you shipping product, number of bugs, are you hitting metrics, how efficient, like what is the I mean, I'm a product person, so I could get in the weeds on
Mm.
the product metrics, but it's about the cadence and momentum of your commitments to delivering new products and enhancements to the business. So really getting to know those line of business leaders and understanding their area of the business is important. And then there's a whole slew of HR metrics. And HR metrics, I mentioned employee retention, employee satisfaction. Those metrics are also broadly looking at the health and happiness of the workforce. So that's where a lot of skill insight actually helps give some nuance to HR metrics that maybe weren't there before, but are often really helpful in thinking about skills transformation. My one word of caution is that I've seen and worked with a lot of organizations who start to build a skills strategy and they think about measuring skills as the end goal. It is not the end goal. Just because you've shown an increase in someone's skill does not necessarily mean that that skill has translated to business impact. Making sure that you take that extra step to say, here's how we are correlating skills with business metrics, and then monitoring that to make sure that's accurate is actually really important. Ooh, I'm losing my where's my coffee?
Yes.
Here, have a sip.
I mean, yeah, I didn't prepare properly for instructional designers and offices drinking coffee.
You
Where's
can't just grab that one that's graphical off to the right.
right? Oh, wait,
So
wrong
this
one.
is
Oh.
live, not virtual there. Sticking with those measurements, a couple key things. One is, and I think I've heard this all year long in different ways, is you need to get closer to the business and understand those skills. At some point, you are relying on the business that they are doing some of those measurements.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with many of those software
Yeah.
ones too that you mentioned there, and it's very different when they start actually looking at those numbers and saying, "Hey, those are important," and measuring them there. But then identifying bugs or something in software
Yeah.
there. What's the skill or skills that are actually would that lead to that? And you could come to conclusions that it's skill X, you find a way to measure that, you improve it, but that doesn't have the
Yeah.
impact that you might see because maybe it was the wrong skill
Yeah.
or there's a combination of skills you're missing. And then I was
Yeah.
thinking also the HR retention, that's a big overarching
Very.
thing. I mean,
Yeah.
what's a skill for retention? But I think it's almost like competencies breaking down to those individual pieces. What are the contributors? So maybe you can target those and not being afraid that hey, training is going to be one of, yes, several other things,
Yeah.
but it's a strong influencer, just like any one thing is. It's not just, oh, that person decided, even if they feel that way.
Well, I do think that L&D has an important role to play in collecting and making sense of skill data. There's been this interesting question of who should own and be the guardians of skill data in an organization. I've seen it play out in many different ways. The reality is that HR often wants to own it because it is broader people data, but L&D folks are the closest to changing it and actually doing ongoing assessment and data collection and aggregation. I think that the challenge for L&D in this environment is to understand that we are a part of an ecosystem. I think for a long time, L&D saw themselves as a like a service division to the rest of the business of like, "Hey, we're here to support you and identify needs and build content and programs to help you achieve your targets." But we're kind of taking on a potentially different role in a skills-based organization where we are the aggregators and sense makers of skill data to help make decisions. So I know there's lots of conversation about how L&D's role is changing. And one of the things I would challenge L&D folks to think about is what if you're not just the services content supplier to an organization, but you're also the data guardians for skills and every time you launch a program thinking about how is this program the data that I'm collecting through folks going through my learning experience, how is that updating and giving us more insight into skills? And so there's this interesting flip. We're going to be at DevLearn next week. Am I going to see you at DevLearn next week?
I'll see ya.
I'll see you, Paul,
And
next week. But
everybody else
there's
who's out there, stop by our respective booths.
right. Well, just find me. I'll be at a book signing. No booth. Maybe I'll hang out with you, Paul.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think there's a shift happening. We've got new tools. We've got new capabilities for instructional designers. I've seen lots of folks saying, "What does the future of L&D look like? How are we transforming? What does this mean?" And I think with skills and skill data, there's an opportunity for us to step into a slightly different perspective from an organization value, not just developing content and programs, but also helping update this kind of critical data resource of skills as we are evolving and helping teams, departments, employees build skills. And so that becomes a really interesting opportunity for us to understand the business better, kind of going back to that point, to have a larger role in strategic decision making because we are the ones that can really say, here's the data that we've been able to collect and the insights that we can provide with that data. But also, we can refine what we're doing for the organization. So, going back to kind of our historical role of providing services, content, learning experiences, now we've got a lot more data to inform those decisions, and we're not just guessing. So, this is how I'm getting back to how do we know that we're having an impact? Once you get the data flywheel going, and I hate using that business speak, but I'm going to use it anyway. Once you get the data flywheel going, we're not only informing the rest of the organization, but we're helping inform our own decisions and investments and what we're doing. And we can look and see, are the programs we're delivering having impact on the skills that we want to build? And then therefore threading it through, are those skills the critical ones that will move those business metrics?
Mhm.
So we've got an interesting moment in time, an interesting inflection point where I think organizations where L&D really steps in to that data role. It doesn't mean that the learning experience side is going away. I see this as an additive component
Mhm.
that we will be able to speak to the things that we're doing in more of a business metric
Yeah.
context.
One of the things that I'm hearing as we talk about this, for the longest time, the ROI models were something that most of us could dream of having that measurable impact, right? We've got
Yeah.
smile sheets because that's easy to do, but getting further and
Yeah.
further up. But this really is anchored in starting at that end of things. It sounds to me anyway, like we're working backwards from the goal in mind. And by doing that, we actually got all those metrics for Kirkpatrick's models and those sorts of things. That's done by the process rather than starting at the back end and saying we've made a bunch of things and now we don't know how to measure it.
Yes, absolutely. I know you all are advocates of XAPI and understand how XAPI can help provide richer data to organizations. If anyone's using XAPI, that's already walking down the path towards being skills based, right? Like you're already thinking about how do I get a deeper sense of impact and metrics and how does data really help me talk about L&D's role in this ecosystem organization. The question really just is, do you have a skills lens that you can layer on top of that that maps to the work being done? There's lots of conversations online right now about skills transformation, and inevitably that it comes down to tasks and breaking down the work into measurable tasks and then mapping tasks to skills. So, in order to do that, to really get closer to the work being done, that's where I think organizations that have already realized that SCORM, binary giving a data point completions or not completions, or like, hey, here's a score that I got at an assessment at the end. Folks that are looking at more nuanced interactions and data and thinking about a deeper depth are already thinking in the right way. It's really like, how do you add a skills layer, which often is an ontology, which we could get into if we um, to map that data to skills. And skills really can map to three different things. Skills can map to work, so that's the skills tasks mapping. Skills can map to people, so that's the human capabilities component. And then skills can map to content. And that's where L&D is often in the driver's seat. So that skills ontology, or what are the skills that are important to my organization, is really the connective tissue across those 3 areas, and where we can play a role in thinking about, okay, how is our content and programming and everything we're doing mapping to the skills that are gonna be the common language for my company.
Mhm.
I was just thinking how transformational it can be for folks. Maybe they've been blessed to be in an organization. Sometimes it's in operations where they really start to measure the key things. And this little change, skill or something there has a big change there. I think for everyone, you might have seen, I was just thinking the movie Moneyball and how transformative the people are like in the statistics and the information, which was breaking
Yeah.
it down to the measurement and ultimately the skills that drive into this, so they knew who to bring on to and who to focus on, or they've taken the sports to the next level of just the training.
Yeah.
They actually do not only physical but visual training and focusing on those skills. And I mean, this
That's such a good analogy, Paul. I never thought of the Moneyball analogy before, but that is such a good
you can
example
see the
of how
power behind,
information.
if you're like feeling, can this really make a difference? I mean, that's the
Yeah,
things that we're talking about that
I'm gonna
transform the
steal that from
industry,
you.
really.
Stealing that. Yeah, I'm definitely stealing the
Well,
Moneyball example.
definitely
You're it's
do. I was thinking it's like, where's something that someone that can all relate to? At the end of the movie, you can really have seen it, even if you had doubts along the way, which I think is sometimes you get
yeah,
caught up in the skills because it's hard to get that. I think back to your original point, this is something that L&D should be in the driver's seat and owning. You can't drive it from the L&D car. It has to be driven from the business car to begin with.
yeah.
And let's assume our or the org wants to do that, and you're being positioned to be in that driver's seat. What are some of the skills that an L&D person should go after or seek to improve in themselves to help make sure that they're staying in that car instead of chasing it?
Yeah, there's kind of a wide variety, and they're probably not ones people would expect. One of the things that I think is really important from a skill perspective for L&D is to be able to bring together executive stakeholders and really being able to collaborate and work through this process in a way that you are both bringing people into the decision-making process to help inform the strategy, but the second set is marketing skills to be able to really understand different audiences within your organization and how to do education and ongoing communication about progress in building a skill strategy. So, upfront, getting the right people in the room. I've seen organizations where I get called in to talk to someone and they're like, "Well, every department in our company has started on their own skills journey and they're like, we've got 12 different skills initiatives and nobody's talking to each other." That is not a great it's not a great way to start because eventually you all should merge together to have this shared data source, which is skill data that you're all using for your respective decisions. So L&D could actually play the role of like facilitating this collaboration, bringing the right perspectives together, getting employees' opinions involved, getting line managers in those conversations to understand their questions and how skills can be valuable to them because really this transformation requires everybody to buy in. And so L&D can actually play a really important role in bringing the right people in the room and then communicating out progress. So probably leadership and marketing skills are probably and then the third category, not a surprise, data skill. So, skills related to data. And sometimes I will say, "Yes, you should go out and build all those data skills and get very smart," and I think that is an L&D skill of the future, so I highly recommend that. I also recommend bringing in HR analysts or data experts within your organization. You may already have some data folks that can be a good collaborator with you to think through some of the nuances of data quality and validation and all of those aspects of data projects that help build trust. So, if you don't have the skills today, build them. Also find the people who have them already and make friends with those people because they will help you along this journey.
I was
No L&D team is an island.
No, and it less and less so, right? Like, I think oh, and I'm gonna forget her name, but she just wrote a book, L&D Order Taker No More. Maybe you guys know who wrote it. Anyway, I love the title of that book because it does correspond very much with a lot of what I talk about in skills transformation. We have for a long time thought of ourselves as those, or
Well,
we've
and it's
elementary
it's
roles
not
of
even that
being
we've
order.
thought of ourselves, it's just that's how the organization has thought of us, right?
Yes.
And utilized us in that regard, so
So if we can establish our a role in these data transformations around skills and decision making, suddenly we serve more purposes and we serve a different type of value in the organization, which I think is really important moving forward. And we wouldn't get out of this. Oh, Jess Omley, thank you. Sorry, Jess. She wrote a book. I think it's,
Yes,
you
L&D
should.
Order Taker No More.
But also maybe Jess's book. I think it's
Hey,
a
they
good
pointed out that she
companion.
did some good marketing and has a good title.
Yes, right? Exactly. I think there's a few books out that are coming out right now from folks in L&D that I think make a good kind of Christmas library holiday gift for your L&D folks and friends. Josh's book on AI, my book on skills, Jess's book. These are all books that are talking about the transformation of L&D and how we need to think about ourselves and our role in the organization differently. And I think individually, they kind of talk about some of these aspects. I think in collaboration, it's signaling that we're in an interesting time and an interesting inflection point. There are some folks out there thinking about how to support L&D folks as they're working their way through this
Mhm.
transition in their
The broader perspective of all this, we've been struggling with this forever. I think about Kathy Moore's action mapping, for instance, that aligns very much,
yeah.
with this, and that's been a reference for a long time in this industry, for instance. And it's another example of how we have long struggled to be seen as something more than an order taker, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of books, so you mentioned you have a book signing next week at DevLearn. Are you doing any speaking as well? Any sessions or conference sessions?
I'm doing a whole day on Monday on skill strategy for L&D leaders and thinking about how to step into our power on the skills train. Then I'm at the AI Summit on Tuesday and book signing Wednesday. Friday, I'm doing a leadership panel on data. So
You'll be there
I'll
the
be
whole
popping
week.
around. I am gonna be there the whole week. I'm doing a morning buzz for the early birds, which are usually all the East Coasters,
Yes,
um, on
'cause it's already
Friday as
late by the
well.
time they get to that early morning.
I mean, I live in California now, so I no longer have the East Coast effect, but when I used to go to DevLearn, I would always be the one at 6 AM. I'm like,
Mm,
"Okay, ready to go. What am I doing?" So,
mm.
yeah, if you're an East Coaster and you find yourself waking up very early, come join me on Friday morning.
My first DevLearn, I woke up what would have been, let's say, 7-ish. I finally got out of bed, home, East Coast 7-ish time thinking. And I went downstairs looking for a coffee source. And then, of course, that brought me through the trade floor of the casino itself. I realized how many people were still sitting there at 4,
Yeah.
Vegas time. Anyway,
They didn't
uh,
wait for that, Chris.
no, exactly. They were just,
They've been here all
I
night,
was
yeah.
morning like, was like, whoa, oh, that's a real thing.
Yep.
Corrine, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a absolutely fascinating conversation. Touches on so many of the things that we end up always bumping into here on Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee, which is brought to you by the team here at Domino. We really work hard to help teams, L&D teams, to create, manage, deliver impactful learning content. Data, we're getting there. It's the direction we all got to go. So have a great time next week at DevLearn. Do connect with Paul. And if anybody's listening and you're there as well, Paul's going to be at the Domino booth. Drop by, say hello, check out that. Oh, there's the book.
Yes, and
Woohoo!
get your signed
Mhm.
copy.
Yeah.
Yes, I will. There's an event on Tuesday evening in the bookstore when the bookstore
Oh,
opens.
yes,
I'll be
in
there.
the morning.
Josh Cavalier will be there.
Oh, that's the late
And
morning, right?
then it's afternoon.
Afternoon,
It
yeah.
starts at
Oh,
4:30.
okay.
So that's on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I'll be doing a signing during conference time from 2:45 to 3:15.
Right
They
on.
can even get a little drink while they get a signed book, I think, right around that time, so
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Hey, have a great week. Thanks for joining us so much. We
yes.
really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thank
Hey, gang, let's dance on out.